Tropical Storm Erick is expected to rapidly intensify into a significant hurricane over the next 24 to 36 hours before slamming right into the coast of Mexico on Thursday. Could this be a Hurricane Otis type situation? In this video, we're going to go over the latest information and likely impacts from Erick. But first, I wanted to say thank you all so much for 500 subscribers. It's a very exciting thing. I really appreciate it. And if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button for more weather updates. So right now, the NHC latest advisory on Tropical Storm Erick, current maximum sustained winds are at 50 miles an hour, still a minimum pressure at 1001 millibars. This is basically unchanged from about 3 hours ago. It's moving northwest at 7 miles per hour. Here's the visible satellite imagery for Tropical Storm Erick, and it's definitely starting to get more organized, just a little bit, but on infrared satellite imagery, it's not very impressive, but you can see that there's a lot of thunderstorm activity really firing up in the outer bands of the storm, and it's starting to get some convection blowing up in the center of the storm. That's where it's going to actually intensify the maximum winds if we can get sustained convection around the center. The eastern side of the storm is actually the weakest side of the storm for right now. But the key messages for Tropical Storm Erick are: Erick is expected to rapidly intensify before reaching the coast of southern Mexico on Thursday, and a hurricane warning is in effect for portions of the coast of Oaxaca. A hurricane watch is in effect for portions of the Guerrero coast. Erick will produce heavy rainfall across portions of Central America and southwest Mexico through this week. Life-threatening flooding and mudslides are possible, especially in areas of steep terrain. And a dangerous storm surge is expected to produce coastal flooding near and to the east of where the center crosses the coast in areas of onshore winds. The latest cone shows that, yeah, the eastern side, really the northeastern side of the storm is actually the weakest side with no tropical storm force winds, but it is in the next few hours. By tonight, it should, according to the NHC, reach 70 miles an hour. Now, we'll have to see if it's able to do that, but by around 12 p.m. tomorrow, we should have a hurricane from this. And then by 12 a.m. on Thursday, this could reach a peak intensity of potentially, according to the NHC, this could be 110 miles an hour at this point, potentially nearing major hurricane intensity. So there's going to be some serious rapid intensification expected from this. And I think the ship's guidance actually shows a 75% chance of in intensifying 65 miles per hour within a 48-hour period. So definitely some very rapid intensification possible with Tropical Storm Erick. We'll have to see how much it's able to intensify, but at this point, between 12 a.m. Thursday and 12 p.m. Thursday, it should make landfall somewhere along the coast, and there's, hurricane warnings in place, hurricane watches, and also tropical storm warnings in place along the coast. And then after it hits, then it's going to weaken down. By 12 a.m. Friday, it's only going to be a weak tropical storm with 40-mile-an-hour winds, and after that, it pretty much dissipates, but still bringing heavy rainfall in the mountainous areas in southwestern Mexico. The latest track guidance for Erick shows that, yeah, the track is still a little bit uncertain on where exactly Erick will make landfall, because if it goes just a little bit further west, as the center starts organizing, then we'll get a better idea of where the center is exactly going to go. But a small difference based on the direction it's going. If it moves more north, then it's going to hit further east. If it just moves just a little bit to the west, then that's going to be a longer distance before it reaches the coast, and that can mean more intensification as well. So that's another thing to watch, and of course that's going to affect where the strongest winds and the biggest storm surge is going to be. But this track could actually affect the intensity quite a bit, just based on how soon it makes landfall. But they're expecting it to reach the coast. A lot of the models are thinking within around the next 48 hours. The current intensity is slowly coming up on the advanced Dvorak technique is starting to intensify the storm. It is taking its time, but if this is able to rapidly intensify like some of these models are predicting, it could it's definitely going to become a hurricane, and a lot of the models are making it a Category 2, potentially nearing Category 3 intensity. The rapid intensification guidance brings this to a hurricane within 12 to 24 hours. Now, just depending on how fast it organizes, I don't really think that it's necessarily going to be a hurricane that quickly, but we'll see. Everything is favorable for rapid intensification, but just based on how it's able to organize right now will affect the intensity in the future by quite a bit, potentially, because it is expected to become a hurricane in 12 to 24 hours, but then within about 24 hours, that some of these rapid intensification models are showing it all the way up to a Category 2 hurricane in 24 hours, and then maxing out potentially in 36 hours. That's from this forecast time is when it's most likely to have that peak intensity. It could be a Category 2, it could be a Category 3, but it does seem like it is in a similar place to where Hurricane Otis was. That's another thing, but I don't think it's going to intensify that much, but nobody expected Otis to intensify as much as it did. But once we get out to after 48 hours, it's going to make landfall or get very close to the coast, and the high terrain is going to really just destroy the low pressure system of the hurricane, and the intensity drops off pretty quickly on the forecast guidance. Now, here's the HAFS-B model, HAFS-B model. They're showing right now they actually think that this is going to be at around 65 miles an hour, almost 70 miles an hour with a pressure of 992 millibars. So already they're intensifying it too quick. So this is going to be a very high-end scenario. I wouldn't say that this is actually going to happen. And just here's what it does. Like over the next few hours, like even the intensity is slowly coming up. Even at this point, it's still not even 70 miles an hour just yet. So it's getting close on the HAFS-B model going into tonight, into tomorrow morning. Then it really starts taking off as it gets close to the coast. And this is a small system. If you notice, the wind field is actually of tropical storm force winds is pretty small. That can actually help it intensify quite a bit. But here's the intensity. It's already at 85 miles an hour by 5 p.m. tomorrow as it's closing in on the coast of Mexico. And then that peak intensity could be 110 knots. That's 125 miles an hour. So that's the HAFS-B model. They're really intensifying this to an extreme extent. And this is at 11 p.m. This is Wednesday night. And then as soon as it moves inland, within just 3 hours of landfall, it's definitely falling apart with winds back down to 60 miles an hour. And these are sustained winds. The wind gusts could be even more intense, as we'll see in a little bit. But after that, the storm does pretty much fizzle out, except the HAFS-B model takes this back offshore and actually intensifies it into a tropical storm and keeps it as a tropical storm, potentially, or a tropical depression, all the way out until it reaches the Gulf of California. So that's interesting. The conditions are very favorable for some quick intensification. Like here's the HAFS-A model showing the sea surface temperatures, and these are sea surface temperatures in the mid 80s. Now, of course, behind the storm, there's going to be upwelling. As you notice, behind the storm there is a drop off in sea surface temperatures. That's just the upwelling that happens with these storms, especially if it's moving slower and has some pretty strong winds. So it is intensifying, though, as it goes over water temperatures of 29 to 30 degrees Celsius. Temperatures over 26 are favorable for hurricanes. Once you get towards 30 degrees Celsius, that's pretty favorable for hurricane intensification. And then, so it pretty much has a lot of fuel in terms of ocean temperatures. Behind it, though, of course, it's upwelling some cooler water. And also the moisture is another favorable thing. So there's some on satellite imagery, it does look like the air is not incredibly moist potentially, but on the forecast models they are seeing a lot of moisture, and it gets even more moist as Erick approaches the coast of Mexico, and pretty much plenty of moisture to intensify this, so that's not going to be a problem. But there's also the wind shear. The wind shear is actually going to be pretty light. Now there's a couple of things. So yeah, there's according to this, it shows a pretty strong outflow. For the most part, the winds above the storm are fanning outward, and that's a good sign for intensification. But here's a sounding kind of the environment. Now it does show actually some shear, moderate shear apparently. There's a lot of moisture, of course, the warm sea surface temperatures, but there's a light to moderate amount of wind shear on this model. So that's a thing that could actually limit intensification, but that's at first. So as it gets closer to the coast, let's notice what happens with the shear. It does actually decrease slightly, but still 10 knots of wind shear is some shear, but it's not unfavorable for the hurricane. And then once it really gets close to the coast, then the shear really drops off. So there's going to be a window of time for this to super rapidly intensify, and we have 3 knots of wind shear potentially, which is basically nothing as it approaches the coast. So that's going to be something interesting to watch. And this is at kind of in the late afternoon on Wednesday. So that's where things could get pretty intense. So that's definitely something to watch. But once it hits, it's going to be bringing in some significant impacts, basically from tomorrow night, Wednesday night, all the way into Thursday, and even after the winds start to diminish, you're still going to have all that rain moving over the region. And here's a look at the total wind. This is the kind of an estimate of potential wind gusts along the coast. You could have these wind gusts in some places closer to 50 miles an hour, but then as you get closer to where the strongest winds of the system are going to hit, which there's some variation on where exactly this is going to hit. There's pretty much from about here to here on the map is where it could actually hit. And so just based on the track models, but somewhere in the middle is most likely. And there could be wind gusts of 90 miles an hour, maybe even close to 100 to 105, maybe even 110 miles an hour along the coast, close to where Erick makes landfall. And then even a bit further inland, you could have wind gusts, especially in the higher terrain. You could have some pretty strong wind gusts of 50 to even 70 miles an hour. So that's going to cause significant wind damage, and also there's going to be a storm surge is going to be a big problem depending on the direction that the wind is funneling in. And this is kind of just an estimate of the waves, especially going close to Puerto Escondido. You have waves of around 15 feet. That's pretty significant. And then going closer to Acapulco, you have waves of about 8 to 10 feet, according to this model. And of course, that's just an average of the waves. You could have a lot higher waves than that, individually. And of course, just depending on where this hits and where the strongest winds are actually funneling in, the storm surge could be pretty significant with this, depending on how fast it's able to intensify. Now, of course, it's a smaller system, so the impacts are going to be localized in terms of the wind for the most part, but the waves are going to be a problem, and also the rain is going to be pretty significant. You could have, even near Acapulco, you could have 6 inches of rain. Salina Cruz could have 7 inches of rain. So that's, and then in between that, you could have some areas seeing over a foot of rain. And so the rain is going to be significant even as you go up to higher elevations, where it's going to be more serious in terms of flooding and mudslide impacts. You could have 4 to 6 inches of rainfall, even a bit further inland. The rainfall potential listed from the Weather Prediction Center actually shows 16 to 20 inches or 400 to 500 millimeters of rain along the coast close to where the hurricane hits, and then 12 to 16 inches or 3 to 400 millimeters around that. And even widespread areas of even 4 to 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches of rainfall around this whole region, gonna produce some pretty significant impacts in terms of the heavy rain and flooding. And I don't know that it's gonna stop there. With after Erick, there could be another system. Right now, here's the GEFS ensembles. They're showing around June 23rd. They're already showing potentially another system trying to get organized. So this is in the next 7 days. So it's a little bit further out. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But definitely potential for another system, even around June 23rd to maybe the June 26th timeframe in the Eastern Pacific. But then now the ensembles are showing growing potential for a storm system in the Western Caribbean, the Gulf, potentially reaching, potentially impacting Central America, the Caribbean, even the Gulf Coast. Definitely something to watch, because this is a pretty significant indication of some tropical activity. But the Eastern Pacific is definitely could produce, I do think it might produce another system, and it also kind of looks close to the coast of Mexico. And then after that, we'll have to watch the Caribbean and the Gulf to see if there's potential activity going all the way from June 25th all the way into July 2nd. So definitely we'll have to see what happens with that. If you like this video, please be sure to hit the like button if you haven't already, share the video, and make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for more weather updates on the tropics. Thanks for watching. Extreme Weather Zone, out.